Cole, Michael, Sibel Asantadou, and Austin Higgins. We have, I think also, I know Jen Higgins is here. I know that Tom, the building commissioner, had to go home early today for illness, and he's not with us tonight. But our recording secretary, Jen Higgins, is here. And Peggy, we would like to thank Peggy, who makes this all possible for us to meet in a hybrid format. We have, under old business, we have the first item is to review the minutes of October 4th, 2023. You've all received those minutes. Are there any questions or comments or concerns about those? I'll move their acceptance. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. We have three decisions to review. Case number 2210, 2211, and 2212. Were there any questions, comments, or concerns about those, or anything you want to change in those? Hearing none, I presume we don't need to vote on those, so we will assume that those are. Jen, I'll drop off signed copies of those tomorrow. Okay, now before we proceed, and this is especially for Austin and Sibel, who didn't have the pleasure of serving on a board for a year and a half with only 5 members. We very rarely had all 5 ever there, and we would always, we actually had to cancel our meetings because we couldn't get 4. But whenever we had a continued case, invariably we would never get the same 4 members from time to time. So there is a procedure in our rules, our operating rules, a long-standing procedure, that when there's a continuation and one of the parties who wasn't there for one of the hearings will certify that he or she has reviewed in this case, reviewed the film of the recording of the meeting they missed, and then they're allowed to serve on the board. So today we have Martin is not here, and Lynn is. And Lynn attended the September 20th meeting, but was not available to attend the first meeting of this case, September 6th. So at this point, Lynn, I'll ask you if you had a chance to review the tape of the 6th and feel yourself prepared to participate fully in this hearing tonight.
I have reviewed the video with great diligence.
Great. So we expect you all the time, and everything you do with diligence, so that's great. Having said that, now we have a panel of 5 members for the hearing of case, the continuation of case 2208, David D. Lawler, trustee, regarding the property at 56 Nauset Road. Mr. Zender.
Mr. Mulligan, thank you for that intro. At the last meeting, it was an unusual meeting, and the members who are here may remember it, and Lynn, you saw on the tape. It actually went to a vote very quickly. I wasn't able to kind of get in there in time, and it went to a vote in which there were 3 members voted in favor and 2 members voted against, and it didn't pass. And I asked the board if they would consider to revoking their vote, for lack of a better description, and they did, and we had some more conversations about the project. And as I understand where we were, the problem that we have with this project is that the house itself, and I'm kind of relating to the board my sense of the board, and I'll do it as fairly as I can, was that the house itself appears to fit the neighborhood. It appears to be okay in terms of its location and its relationship to other structures, but from a building coverage standpoint, it has a high coverage number, and that number is about 27 point. I think it's 27.6% is what that number is, and that's a high building coverage number, and that's a function of the small lot. And so 2 of the members were concerned about the size of the structure, and they were concerned about whether this sets a precedence in the size of the project. I've met with my client and our build team, and the clients really like this project. They had gone in and done some substantial redesigns in order to go through the conservation process, had pulled the house back and reduced the scope to address conservation issues, got work out of the 50-foot setback, and they're struggling with how to modify this house without really changing the design. So the purpose of this meeting today, I thought, was going to be just to schedule a site visit and try to get the members back out and look at the site and answer any questions they have. But if we can get any further feedback from the members for a next meeting, that would be wonderful. One thing I'd like to do, and I don't want to re-present the project, because you've all seen it, you've seen the plans, you've seen the site, I hope you've all seen the site, but I'd like to kind of refocus the board on one issue of law, which is the number's high, but the project, as I see the project itself, the way that this was designed by Bob and Elise, with the roof line that they've chosen, the setback in the top stories, the massing, the increased building coverage being at the rear of the property where the garage was, where it's not really visible to the public, that they've done a really good job of designing the house. And that leads me to the standard that we operate under, and I went back and reread it today and brought it with me, because I don't think I spent enough time with the board on the standard for the granting of a special permit. It's a little different from other towns, and I'm going to read it if the board doesn't mind. Special permit granting authority. Unless specifically designated otherwise, the Board of Appeals shall act as a special permit granting authority. Public hearing. They should be only be issued following public hearings held within 65 days after the filing application, and a copy of which shall be given to the town clerk. Criteria. Special permits may be granted, not must, may be granted when it has been found that the use involved will not be detrimental to the established or future character of the neighborhood and the town, and when it has been found that the use involved will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the chapter, and shall include consideration of each of the following: adequacy of the site in terms of size for the use, suitability of the site for the use, impact on traffic flow and safety, impact on neighborhood visual character, including views and vistas, adequacy of the method of sewage disposal, source of water and drainage, adequacy of utilities and other public services, noise and litter, and then impact on groundwater quality. And so I don't think the question for the board is the house too big from a building coverage standpoint? We know from town council, from your previous question, that the board has the authority to grant a special permit for exceeding lot coverage where the site is already exceeding building coverage. I think the question for the board is, when the board looks at those 8 criteria, and I'll walk through them, is the site appropriate in terms of size for the use? Now, the site is small, but it does provide for a driveway going in, it provides for a garage, it provides for parking in the rear. It's a terminal roadway in the sense that, no one is coming past the site to get to it. So clearly there's enough room on the site to locate the house, and there's enough room between the house and the bank for recreation, and there's enough area for the house. Adequate suitability of the site for the proposed use. As the board knows, this is Nauset Heights. These waterfront lots were designed for and are being used for primarily second home use, but some principal home use. The site is certainly suitable for this type of structure that's there in terms of both the design of the structure and the location of the structure. Impact and traffic flow and safety. It's still keeping a same bedroom count. There's still a driveway to get the vehicles in and out of. Once the house is completed, it will be residential home use. There shouldn't be any noticeable impact on traffic flow and safety in the neighborhood. Impact on neighborhood visual character, including views and vistas. I think the members that have been out there, and I think you all have, this house does not impact the view or vista, meaning it's not a house that impacts the ability to look at the Nauset Estuary from either a public road or from another developed property, and I think that's borne out by the neighbor participation. I find that when neighbors come to zoning hearings, first and foremost among them is what's it going to do to their view, and we don't have that here. Adequacy of the method of sewage disposal. We have a sewage disposal system that meets code to be designed, and drainage. We don't have a drainage situation here. Adequacy of utilities and public services. The property gets its public services, from the roadways. Noise and litter. We don't expect that, other than in connection with the construction itself, there would be any unusual noise or litter for the project. And the impact on groundwater quality and recharge volume. The project was designed to meet the conservation requirements. It's set back from the coastal bank. It's not in the 50. They're not significantly increasing in any way the hardscape or the lawn. So I think that although it's clearly up to this board to decide whether to grant a special permit, you have the absolute discretion to do it. I think that other than the fact that the building coverage number is high, it clearly meets, I hate to use the word clearly, it meets the 8 criteria set forth for a special permit. So I think it's in proper form for the approval. And we would really love to see an approval here rather than have the applicant have to go back and redesign for the sake of meeting a number, to just hit a number on this. So that's the sum and substance of my presentation. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you poll the board before taking a vote so that if we don't have the votes, we can at least make some provision for holding a site visit and getting the members out there and seeing if the applicants are willing to redesign or whether they're going to withdraw the project.
Very good, Mr.
Thank you,
Secretary.
Mr. Mully.
I'll address the issue of polling at the end after we have a discussion, we'll talk about that. But I have, after the last hearing, you kept saying, it doesn't matter, we can make this smaller, but no one's gonna see it. No one's gonna see it, you know? It doesn't matter. You said that repeatedly, and it struck me, I'd have to go back to that site. So I did. I went back on a very pleasant day, and my wife and I, we walked the property, we walked around the neighborhood, and we saw the house. Since I've become chairman, I haven't taken forceful positions on any case. I was more forceful when I was just one of the body. But I always let my opinion be known, but I haven't really argued for a case or spoken at length. The first thing I want to say is when you provided an exhibit that shows the house as it is today and the house as it would be, a picture from the bluff down below, and it's very difficult to see any difference at all. You know, so from that perspective, that was a useful exhibit. But when you really go into that neighborhood, I think it's a well-established, it's an older, well-established, high-end neighborhood with remarkably mature, well cared for plantings, providing privacy between lots. The lots are all pretty close there, really. But the private, you get a sense of real privacy because of the plantings there. And then I got thinking about who would see if we made this smaller. Is there anybody who, I suppose the two neighbors, and even they are blocked by the vegetation. You know, he has a right of, the driveway seems to have a right of way across the neighbor or the, but you can almost do anything on that lot and nobody's going to see it, which is what you were saying last time. I think it is a very large percentage of building coverage. The issue of building coverage, we've been having a discussion about that this week on another matter. But I think it fits. I think frankly with the two separate buildings, the addition you're making isn't going to be a big change. It would be interesting to see the site staked out. But I came back after my view after the last meeting, more sure of my vote that it's an appropriate, it's in keeping with the neighborhood. Interestingly enough, none of the neighbors have complained. I suspect some of them may be wanting someday to do exactly the same thing because some of those houses are older. And I think that carries some weight too. You know, who best to understand the tenor and the nature and the character of the neighborhood and the people who live there? And if there's no one in opposition, I think that speaks loudly. So that's my say, and with that, I'll let anyone else opine or ask questions.
So since I wasn't there, I don't have questions, but I will opine since I have not been a part of the discussion before. I do have concerns about precedent, And, I understand Martin's concern that, having such a big increase in the lot coverage could set a precedent that is concerning, and I care about precedent. However, the house was moved back so that they meet the requirements on the coastal bank. There is no expansion on the footprint. All of the setbacks are the same or improved. It's a new septic system that is being put in. They've done work to make to establish vegetation that is appropriate, thanks to our Conservation Commission. And to me, I don't think we're likely to have another case where all those things are protected, if you will, or have happened, but has that kind of increase in coverage. And so I don't think we're setting a bad precedent to approve this, because so many things that we care about were taken care of. And so I think it fits in the neighborhood, and I'm comfortable approving it.
Yeah, I generally agree with the not wanting to set precedent, but I think the nature of the lot, the fact that, talking about a breezeway between the garage or some connector between the garage and the main house, whether that is there or not there would have little to no difference on the actual, structure and the, I would say, potential imposing nature of the structure. If we were to remove that, for example, to decrease the building coverage, I don't think it would noticeably change the character or make it more adequate for the site. Considering there was a garage behind it, previously detached, and again, we did pull that a few inches further away, but further away from the lot line. So it doesn't seem any more detrimental than if the garage wasn't connected.
I just want to add one thing just before Sibel gets a chance to speak. I mean, if all of those other factors weren't as they are in terms of moving it back and meeting all the setback, not intensifying the problem with setback, and keeping the same footprint, I'd be with Sibel and say this is too big a house. But this is a unique case to me in the way it was designed. So I just wanted to say that.
Matt or Sibel?
To me, I think in studying it further and listening to all the members here, I think that the one part that I do fall to is that it's not detrimental to the neighborhood, which is always an important factor. And it is a small parcel, and looking at the neighboring parcels, they're much larger, so I don't think that they'll come back to us and say they're gonna do building coverage of 27% on their lot.
Right.
So I would say that I'm in favor of the project because it's not detrimental to the neighborhood.
Matt, you want to add anything?
So, I think we discussed the application at the last hearing, and I don't think my mind has changed since then. The one thing I just want to make sure that we confirm and have on record, I think I heard it said earlier, the house is set back to the coastal bank, fully conforms in its new location. The building height fully conforms as it's designed presently, right? Those two are correct?
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
The height fully conforms. It's not really a function of fully conforming as to location relative to the coastal bank, because you can construct.
Well, 1.5 times its height, which it
Oh,
conforms
no,
with.
no, I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. No, Matt, yes, it does meet the 1.5. It's more than 50 feet away from the coastal bank, so it's outside of that jurisdiction for the coastal bank height setback, yes.
So the two primary nonconformities are coverage and horizontal setbacks, right? Which we heard a minute ago, the horizontal setbacks were either maintaining or improving, the coverage were increasing. And the only reason that this is allowed is because it is under a provision in the bylaw that relates to properties with existing nonconformities, right? So as I look at the packet, there's a plan that I believe is the Nickerson and Berger plan that from 59 when the lot was subdivided. And as I look at the geometry of the lot, it looks to me like it's a rectangle that was carved out of a greater rectangle. And so the protection that we're seeking to, if we are seeking to grant the special permit, the avenue that we're allowed to do so is because it's an existing non-conforming lot. So I just want to get something on the record that responds to how this qualifies as pre-existing non-conforming as required by the section of the bylaw that we'll use to issue the special permit. And again, this wasn't an empty lot that was carved out. This had two structures on it. The garage was already up against the property line. Again, if this subdivision was done today, it would not be protected under that portion of the bylaw because it's not pre-existing non-conforming. It would simply be a non-conforming lot, right? So if we could just get something on the record that speaks to the 59 subdivision of the lot, why that qualifies.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please.
I don't think the ability to grant the permit is because the lot itself is non-conforming. That's not a factor here. The building coverage itself, there's an existing dimensional nonconformity, which is that the existing coverage of the garage and the house, which go back before zoning, is 20.7%. So it's the fact that there's an existing non-conforming dimensional nonconformity. It's not the lot. I don't think it has to do with the lot itself. It has to do with the dimensional nonconformity of the building coverage is what triggers the special permit availability.
All right, so I just want to pin down. So in 1959, there either wasn't zoning or the zoning in place didn't prohibit this coverage that we're now allowing to be increased.
Yes. The structure predates the zoning requirement of 15% maximum lot coverage. And so that creates the nonconformity that makes the availability for the special permit.
I disagree. I think the size of the lot does too. I think you can have several reasons why it's non-conforming. I don't think you can say it's just the one. I think if you had a different design and you shrunk down the coverage, you would still be non-conforming in terms of the lot. So you'd still be covered by that section. That's my understanding.
I don't.
That's right.
The special permit, there's nothing changing about the lot size itself. The lot size is just in the calculation used for coverage. So I'm not sure, is the lot size directly or primarily of concern here, or is it just the fact that the ratio of the building coverage to lot size?
It's all three things. It's a non-conforming lot because it doesn't have sufficient size. It's a non-conforming structure because it doesn't have sufficient setback, and it's a non-conforming structure that's proposed because it has excessive coverage, right? So I just want to make sure that we have on record that it predates the zoning and therefore is protected under the statute that we're going to reference.
That's right. That's my understanding, man. I agree with that. Okay, we should ask, the benefit, now that I know how to work this, I see there's only one other person, attendee, someone named Joseph. Whoops, how do I get out of this now? Okay. So before we talk any further, I should take a pause and if there's anybody, I don't know if there's anybody in the room there, if there's anybody out in the nether world, in virtual space, who wishes to comment either in favor or opposition to the application.
No hands
Anybody?
raised.
You see anybody, Peggy?
No hands raised.
Yeah. All right. There's nobody there in the room with you, Ben?
There's no one here in the room other than myself and Sibel and Austin.
Okay. So, I don't think we need to poll, but we have something we should talk about as a group later, not this. We, in the prior board, we decided that we would, well, I'll do that afterwards, after this meeting. So I don't think we need to poll. And
No.
I would move to grant a special permit,
Seconded.
seconded by Austin. All right, let me call the roll. Matt Cole, please.
Yes.
Then I called Austin Higgins,
Yes.
Isabella Santaroo,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. So you have your permit, Matt, and
Thank you all. Yeah, thank you.
5-0.
Thank you. And thanks, Sadal. Thank you.
Okay, we have some other business. Let me just, excuse me, while we're on this topic, and it's fresh in everybody's mind, I just wanted to have a conversation with Isabel and Austin. Did you understand? It was the issue of who was to vote when was complicated by the fact that we had to vote in the previous meeting. We've had these situations many times over the last year and a half where people, some people heard the original case and it's continued and we had to substitute people. So, and we decided we should do that each time because otherwise you never know when you're going to get the 4 or 5 people back together again, if you follow me. This in terms of efficiency, if you don't take advantage of the quorum when you have it each time you have it, you can never be sure of getting it again. And then we also have constraints on how long we have to consider these cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you understand what we did tonight and why we did it? Is you all set with that? It wouldn't even have been an issue except we had that prior vote. And,
The double continuance, I think, was an additional factor. The only question I have is, since Lynn was not present for the original meeting,
Yeah.
Martin was, so Martin was the person voting. In the follow, the first continued meeting, despite Lynn
right.
being there, Martin would continue to be the person voting because he heard the original case. Is
Yeah,
that,
even though he's an associate member, not a full board member, that has been our practice. And if you were there, you continue, and you came back for the second one, you would continue to be that case.
but here, the loss of one of the original voting members, regardless of alternate or
Right.
primary member,
That's right. That's
provided
right.
the person has given themselves the required background, can step in to vote.
That's right. Lynn substituted not because she's a full board member, but because Martin wasn't here. We needed, and the applicant is entitled in every case to have, he's entitled to have 5 people hear the case.
Yep.
When we only have 4, now you haven't experienced this yet, when we only have 4 members, we ask the applicant if he'd like to continue the case until he gets a full board. So that's what happens, and you get, so you can get a situation as we had for about a year and a half where we had to continue cases because we didn't have 4 members. And then if we had a continuation from one hearing to the next, we very rarely got the same 4 members back. So we have a lot of experience with this. What made this more difficult and more questionable, not more questionable, but just more difficult, awkward is the word, more awkward, is the fact that we had the vote, which we probably shouldn't have. That was my fault. We should have sort of given some indication of further arguments. Anyway, so the other thing that comes up before we get to the topic I really want to talk about with Lynn is polling. We had a discussion, and we don't have that. That's not in the practice and procedures. What we decided with the different board mix, one of our members who's no longer a member felt very strongly that we shouldn't poll. At least one, maybe 2 members felt we shouldn't poll, but that we should encourage every member to ask questions and let the applicant poll before a vote, if you will. Let the applicant roll the dice with reading the questions. You follow me? I'm making myself clear. Now, the council tonight asked us to poll. We didn't have to poll because everyone had expressed their opinions before we got to that point. But we have to come up with a policy about polling, whether we should continue to not do it, or, and I've checked with other boards do it. Some boards do polls, some boards don't. It's totally a matter of our choice, what we're comfortable with. I don't know if anybody feels strongly about it either way.
I think a complete ban is not what I would be in support of. I find it ends up just needing to use coded language or relying on somebody to decode, general sentiments from the room, where it almost feels like you're going around the rule just to go around the rule to say, I think this is a great application, or I think it's just kind of beating around the bush. So if there's no issues like open meeting rules or town procedures that would prevent us from, maybe not explicitly, I'm about to vote yes or I'm about to vote no, but some general, more direct sentiment, I think, would be appropriate, is where I stand.
No, I think that's exactly right, and particularly after the case has been presented and not before the case has been presented. I don't think the purpose here is to create surprise or any sort of suspense, right? So giving the candidates that have spent considerable time and dollars to get to us, they should have some sense of where the board stands. It's a non-mandatory courtesy that we should offer when appropriate and after the facts have been presented.
And I think for cases where we have small modifications,
I think they deserve to, and I like to hear where people are thinking. I don't call it polling. I just want to know what their issues are, because I want to think, before I decide, I want to hear everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, what a polling would be, is anybody going to vote against it? That would be sort of the polling. And I think Matt hits on a very important point. This isn't a gotcha process, This is trying to protect the nature and character of the town. But at the same time, it's not an adversarial proceeding with the applicants either. It's trying to get them to get us all on the same page. They can come up with a plan that we can approve, basically. Now, you understand the reason the applicant wants a poll, because if he has a vote and he's blindsided by the vote, he can't bring it back for 2 years. And that's a heavy burden if he really wants to do is just so I can lop off 100 feet here or whatever I can do. And otherwise, a 2-year penalty is a harsh penalty, frankly.
and is
So
there a way around the two? Is there a way around the 2 years with substantial changes to the application? Okay.
No, that's mandated by the state. It's part of the code, and that's why it puts, that's why it's sort of incumbent upon us to be fair and give people a chance to get a sense of where they are. That's why when we had the vote, Ben was devastated, because that means they can't come back again for 2 years. And what he really wanted is to say, hey, let's just find out if it's much better for him to say, okay, I understand this is too much coverage. We can I can take him back and lop off a few things, But depending on any kind of a house they wanted, they weren't going to be able to lop off enough to make that 26 number anywhere close to 15%. The lot is just too small. Anyway, but I don't want to re-argue that case, but I think it's important to understand why he was devastated by the vote and why we rescinded it.
Yeah, that was surprising that he did that, but I have no problems polling. I think it's good to be open with the applicants. It's just courtesy.
All right. Well, that's good. Yeah, it avoids surprises, and it gives us, I think, reduces the aspect of us being an adversarial board. We're here we're here to protect the town, but we're also here to work with the, I mean, these people spend a lot of money, they bought their property, and we're trying to make it so they can use their land and, without destroying the character of the town. You know, that's really our goal. It's a creative process as opposed to, it's a regulatory, they call it regulatory, but it's regulatory and creative. At any rate, I think that's enough of that. But we have something interesting to talk about. Lynn, why don't you give us a background of what you, I don't think Austin and Sibel understand that you are our representative to that group, and explain
Yeah.
that to us.
So there is a group called the Zoning Board Task Force. And it is mainly people from the Planning Board of Orleans, but there are provisions for one person from the ZBA to be on it, and there are provisions for one at-large member to be on it. But it's mainly a subcommittee of the Planning Board that noodles over zoning changes that the Planning Board is considering. It doesn't meet often, twice a year in general, before the town has a vote on zoning changes. We had a meeting today, and there is an issue, and, well, let me back up. I volunteered to be on it, and I got the agenda 2 weeks ago. It was totally cryptic. I could not understand what they wanted us to think about, and I had to track down George Meservey to say, what is it you're doing here? Because it's done mainly by people who are on the planning board who know what they've been talking about, and I'm one person that hasn't been there. So I did not do what I want to do, which is make sure I understand the issues, and at a meeting before, at one of our meetings before they meet, we discuss whatever issue I think deserves our opinion as input. So it's not just my opinion, but our collective wisdom. And it didn't happen this time, but I made a point with George Meservey. I really need to get to him sooner. And so we have at least one meeting of the zoning board in order to get input. However, it turns out the discussion today, there was one issue that I think deserves input, and it's still valid input, because whatever occurs, a change because of the discussion, will not be put before a town vote until the spring town meeting. Although they'll have the select board vote on it probably in February, but we've got a month. So we could actually, if you want to go away and think about the one issue I'm going to put out, we could do that and talk about it at the next meeting. So I'll pause. Any questions about it? We've never had a practice before of the whole board having input. Michael Marnick attended, and he I'm not sure what sort of input he gave, but he attended, and we really didn't have a back and forth between the zoning board and this particular task force. And Jerry, I think, feels we should be asked what our view is. I do too, on matters of zoning. So let me talk. I'm going to give you a brief update on two issues that came up, and then ask your opinion on the third one. So the first was the board has kicked around raising the threshold for a special permit from the 4,000 square feet to something higher. And the number that I was told they were kicking around was 6,000. So I asked Matt and Jerry, as the two longest board members, serving board members, what they thought about it. What I didn't want to do was get everybody polled, because we shouldn't discuss it except in an open meeting. You can talk with a couple of people. So Martin and Sibel, again, what I'm trying to do is make sure in an open meeting, this whole board gets to discuss those issues going forward that the task force considers. But I asked Matt and Jerry what they thought, and the feedback I got was, Matt said, it really depends on the lot size. I'm not for 6,000. I could be open to 5,000 raising it, but it totally depends on lot size. And we, you know, and he threw out some thoughts about that, but you know, it deserves discussion. Jerry's thought, Jerry, this is my interpretation, was the 4,000 probably, given the town wants to maintain its character, huge houses are not, you know, we don't want a whole town of huge houses, that the 4,000 limit probably results in a lot of folks doing less than that, so they don't have to come to the zoning board. And we've only approved homes that are mostly in the 4,000s range, not over 5 or 6. Those have been almost never have we approved that. Or has it come before us? So, and it turns out the planning board members there today said they think abutters should have a chance for any home over 4,000 square feet. Abutters should have a say. That's a big house, and they should have a say in what it does to the character of the neighborhood. So the task force is not going to recommend changing the limit, and I think, Matt and Jerry, that was comfortable with you, right?
You're muted, Jerry.
Yeah, you're muted. Jerry, you're muted, yeah.
You've expressed exactly my view, that there should be some, if you're gonna increase it past the 4,000, there should be some relationship to the size of the lot. Because, you know, a 4,000 square foot building or a 40,000, minimum 40,000 square foot lot is the right size. But if you had we had one application where there was an 80,000 square feet lot, well, you can build a much bigger house. A big house on a big lot doesn't change the character of the neighborhood. A big house on a small lot changes all by itself. That one house can change the whole character and feel of a neighborhood. So there should be some that's my first point, should be some correlation to the size of the lot. But secondly, I think Lynn expressed that well, is that I think a lot of people, you know, you get a lot of land and you go to an architect or designer, but Sibel would know better than I for sure, and you look at the town, they said, well, there's a 4,000 square foot limit, and so we'll aim for that, you know, if we want a big house. And that's, so I think that keeps a lot of houses under 4,000 square feet. So if you move it to 5,000, you get a lot of houses, a lot more houses between 4,000 and 5,000 than you otherwise would. I also don't sense this town, the people in this town feel the need for bigger houses. I think there's sort of a resentment of that. We've seen that, we really saw it in spades and Skakit twice. When Skakit has these nice little cottages, it's a beach community, and then someone sells a lot, and people come in with not even a big house, but, you know, not a 4,000 square foot house, but there's real despair amongst the neighbors. You know, this is really going to change. It's more than just objection, it's really despair that their whole neighborhood is up for grabs. So anyway, that's too much. Since the issue isn't going to arise anyway, I overtalked.
Yeah, no, there's not a burning desire to change it on the planning board.
There's a desire in the town to change it, frankly.
No, and absent our burning desire to change it, which we weren't the ones that raised it, I think it stays as it is.
What was the
The second-
reasoning, if I may ask, what was the reasoning as to why they were looking to change it to 5,000 or 6,000?
You know, I don't, Sibel, I honestly don't know. It was sort of the last thing on the agenda, and they were winding up, and I don't know who or why. I think mainly because they went, somebody raised it, And they went back and they looked at our decisions over the past 3 years, and we've approved all of them, over 4,000 square feet. But Jerry went back and looked at it too, and again, most of them were in the mid-4,000s, 4,200 to 4,500, I would say, 4,600. So nothing really much was over 5,000 or 6,000. So anyway, so I think it's because we've approved all of them, so why do we want to, take up all our time with approving, having a limit that we end up always approving?
Got it.
Yeah, but
Can I
So-
stop for a second? Can I stop for a second, Lynn? Lynn, Sibel, do you agree with that the 4,000 acts is sort of a cap on, or maximum what people start to plan for? You agree with that?
I think it does, and then when I compare it to other towns are actually more restrictive, because what they do is they count like floor levels.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more, their formula is very complicated, and it adds up to actually being more restrictive. So I think that Orleans, I don't think we should go above 4,000. And I don't mind approving buildings more than 4,000, but as you were saying, as everyone was saying, it depends on the specifics of the lot, which is why the Zoning Board of Appeals reviews projects.
Yeah, right. But
Specifically to each project.
People start out and say, well, let's pick a number 4,000 as our max, or you think that doesn't enter into it?
It's so generous that it's not a primary constraint, right? So you can literally build just shy of 12,000 square feet of finished area, basement, first and second floor, and not have, and if you've got 3,999 feet of coverage, you don't have to come in. So I don't think it's a real factor in limiting house size overall. Just backing up to our involvement with this board, I think we should be less, or continue to be consultative, but I also think that we should proactively take matters that we want to see changed to the board and request that they be changed, not simply accept the answers given to us. So to Sibel's question of, why this comes up, to me, if there's a type of case that gets rubber stamped by our board, and I hate to use that word, but so often it's like 4,000 to 4,500 feet on big lots, and it just totally makes sense, and we say yes. So if there were an application, it almost becomes unnecessary. There is something there. So maybe it's not enough to change it, and that is why we're here to review them case by case. But it certainly was worth the discussion, if nothing else, because there's so many cases that come up just over 4,000 that we seem to always grant approval to.
The interesting part is also that if we were, let's say that they design a house that's a single story spread out. So it's a small
Right.
scale, height-wise, but it's spread out. That becomes over 4,000 square feet, but
Right.
the intensity of the lot is the same as what Matt was saying if you have 3 stories. So there's an unfairness to it if you look at it that way.
Yeah, right. Just to go back, Matt, when we did have one input, and Michael brought it to the planning board, and they followed our advice. Back when I first joined the board, the FEMA, whoever does it, changed all the
Flood height.
flood heights, all the flood plans in the town, and people weren't aware of it. We started getting all these cases, and they say, well, and we had in our language, in our buildable, in the definition of a buildable upland, if you're on a flood plan, or that wasn't part of buildable upland, and the town with that automatic provision sort of handed over to the FEMA the definition of buildable upland. And a lot of people in town had no idea that they lost a lot of buildable land, frankly, under the definition. So we started getting a number of cases where that came up. We went back to the planning board, and the planning board took that out of the definition of buildable upland. So we have had, they do listen to us if we come up with something.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to suggest that they're not. I'm just saying we shouldn't be afraid to suggest change if we start, if the world around us changes and we
Yeah.
Again, I'm not convinced that we shouldn't go back for 4,500 square feet if over 2 acres, something along those lines. And so maybe not today, but let's think about it going forward and as we see cases.
Yeah, I agree, Matt, that we should put forward things that we think need to be changed.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. So, the second issue they talked about, and this is something we did put forward, and they are going to consider, when we approved the Locust Road condo development
Yeah.
with contingent on no rentals under 1 month, Jerry mentioned that to George Meservey, that was something that probably the town ought to think through, rather than us doing it on a case-by-case basis as we see the issue come up in a case before us. And so there was a discussion about that, and the next step is going to be George is going to think it through and recommend something to the planning board that the town ought to do about new development and limits on short-term rentals and new development. So that's what he's gonna think through and put forward something. They didn't come to a conclusion today, but he's gonna work on it. He thinks it's something the town should opine on and not leave the zoning board just doing it on a case-by-case basis. Which makes sense.
That's great.
Yeah. And then the last thing, this one I did want to get opinions, but as I said, if we need to think about it, we certainly have until our next meeting. There is what they are proposing is for the development of 3 to 6 apartment units. They are proposing to eliminate the special permit needed by the zoning board. And there would be an architectural review and a site review, but not zoning board review. The concern, and I asked, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because it wasn't clear to me. They said, I heard a couple of things, although I didn't think it was very crisp, but it was that we haven't had very many cases where people come in and convert to a small number of apartments. We had a couple that I remember, and we just approved one that was over in your neighborhood, Austin, so that you recused yourself on. And they say they want more development like that. They think there's an opportunity, we're not getting it. And they feel that the whole permitting process is daunting. And the kind of developer that would do 3 to 6 apartments is like the one that we had, who he and his attorney didn't seem to be very with it. They're not sophisticated development people that do this all the time and, hire attorneys that understand it, blah, blah. So they felt like that, and they say that, and they said, it's a cost and a time sink to go to all these boards, and do we really need to have the zoning board bless it? So I wanted to get feedback from you all on that, whether there would be concerns that we would have if they made it a development by right, to allow apartments 3 to 6 units to be developed, as long as it meets other requirements and it goes through site and architectural review.
So I have somewhat of a unique perspective on this, and I would just say in short, so he's uncomfortable to give up control. Anything that we can do to streamline the process, to encourage developers to invest in our town and offer a streamlined process, deserves studying. So I would just say it's too expensive and there's too many steps to getting projects like you described permitted. And while I don't want to lose our voice and our function in the process, perhaps there's a substitution for it. Maybe there's a zoning board member that sits on the site plan review, one of those two hearings. Maybe it's, we work with Tom Evers because he does sit at that site plan review to, represent and report back to us. I don't know, but anything that we can do to catalyze projects to add housing units to our town is of critical importance.
Now, one of the things that I have
I
concerns.
don't mind giving things up at all. And I don't mind giving this up. But it occurs to me that those other two processes, I'm not sure, but there's no public input, is there, to those two?
You're giving up the public input step.
Yeah, that's the input.
Well, those are noticed meetings, though.
They notice meetings, but you're not allowed to attend, are you? Is the public allowed, let's just say you're a neighbor and you want to opine against it. Are you allowed to attend either of those meetings?
I don't know.
I think
I
they're
don't know
allowed,
either.
but they don't really, but it's not advertised, right? You're allowed, but it's not advertised, so
It's
people
not,
may not
it's
know.
advertised only in the town website. It isn't advertised in the paper.
Right.
So you think they're allowed, but nobody knows about it.
I don't think they're allowed, because the site planning, it's just basically town employees, they meet, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning and just go over these things. I don't think it's public. But on the other hand, for us to get in the middle of this, the town wants to support it and the neighbors don't, and it comes in here and they yell at us, what do we add to the process,
Right.
Although I don't think that's, in my memory, the small apartment developments we've approved have not had any neighbor objection, really.
Well, we had the Locust Road was terrible, everybody objected. Every neighbor-
Oh, yeah, that one, yeah. But Jerry, that one was too big. They're talking 6.
That's right.
Well, that was 9, so we have 6.
Yeah, that would be too big. They would want that to go through ZBA.
Yeah.
Now, I think I'm aligned with or in agreement with the spirit of what we're trying to do here. I think, streamlining the process for these smaller, like smaller developers like the one in Old Toad. As for the other requirements in 16431, adequacy of lighting, all these other things, would those then fall under, or could those be transferred to site plan review? So I think technically we
They
are.
actually do that. They actually do that. If you look at their decisions, they actually talk about those things. I think
There was a discussion, Austin, about parking. Who's gonna look at the parking? And George felt that he was gonna craft something that made it clear adequacy of parking would have to be reviewed. Either by Tom Evers it would have to be reviewed.
Yeah, I think just shifting the responsibility, because some things in here specifically say, it have to be carved out, I think, to make sure that we're still covering the intent of the, traffic circulation, parking, that sort of thing. Was there any discussion on what districts this would apply to, or would this be across all the apartment allowable districts?
I'm gonna get back to you. The language that they gave us was, it seemed to me it mainly applied to rural business and general business. And I'm gonna ask that question, because I have that question. Does it apply to residential?
Well, I don't think you can build apartments in residential right now at all, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it doesn't. So it's RB, LB, GB, and VC. And somebody's gonna tell me what VC is?
Village center.
Thank you. They talked about Village Center a lot. So it's those districts.
Yeah, I would support that. I'm not opposed to it. I think.
Now, was 6 decided on for any specific reason? 3 obviously, because that's the threshold for apartments, but you know, is 6 a special number, like, because I live in a quadplex, so, you know, 2 quadplexes would end up being 8, and is that too far out of the purview of what they're trying to do here? I'm not,
Again,
6 sounds right,
I didn't
but,
ask where they came up with, and I think, again, George is going to go back and craft something, but he said 3 to 6 in general, so he's going to craft something. So I don't know the answer to your question,
Okay.
Austin.
I think it's just carving out the end of the spectrum, right? The smallest end of the spectrum, see how that goes. You could always go higher, but that allows
Yeah.
small projects where the financing, where the financial model is the most delicate. It helps those projects out. When you're spreading the cost of attending across a 60-unit project, it's very different, right?
yeah.
And much less controversial, I hope, to ask for 4 units than 60.
Yeah, that's fair.
And to live next door.
Yeah, so I'll be interested in hearing what George comes up with for specific wording. I think I need to look through all of 164.31. I have it up here just as a reference, but again, I think I'm in agreement with the intent of it. I think it will potentially amplify, or kind of like we were talking about for square footage, the fact that you have to actually go for a special permit in and itself is a deterrent. So if you had the ability to, had the land, had whatever, and you wanted to go through with it, it makes it more accessible for folks who don't want to pay for it, don't need to go through the long process of getting a lawyer, reviewing everything, and coming to meeting, potentially for the whole thing to get turned down if you're not prepared to make changes or make provide a substantial or good enough application.
Yeah. I think we do a very good job at making pro se applicants comfortable here. Many of the time we lead them through, they submit an application that is not satisfactory, and we lead them, and we lead them through the answers to the questions, which is a recognition that we don't want to make it any more complicated or expensive than it has to be. Even on the one on Old Toad Road, Mr. Donahue, I was trying to just lead him through the questions, and he got nervous answering them. So we gave him a continuation. I was prepared to have him go on the record with the questions. But I think it's better off if we don't have to do that for any of these small units. I would support that.
Is there? I could probably look through and find it, but is there or what is the square footage requirement for apartments? Is that, I assume that's probably zoning area based. I'm trying to find the table right now. So I guess my question is ultimately, if they were to if they were to violate anything that would require a variance or special permit, they would still have to come to us. It's just they wouldn't have to come to us for the apartment itself under
Right.
164.31.
Yes.
Okay.
If they have, yes, that's correct.
Cool.
I'm not sure of that. I'm not sure.
If you have like a conforming 3/4 acre lot, conforming 3/4 acre lot, and you want to put 6 apartments on it, right now you gotta come for a special permit. The proposal is to make that project exempt, a by right project.
Okay.
Of a right, you can do it.
But if you were trying to, if for whatever reason the existing structure on that lot that you were then building apartments on had a pre-existing nonconformance and you were intensifying that, you would still.
We're coming back.
Then,
That's
my
right.
understanding is they would come,
Okay.
it would come to zoning.
No free pass for just building apartments. Okay, a little free pass.
But I think what you're going to find is that these are lots that probably have a small house on them now, and they got to tear the house down, and
Right.
and then they won't have to come to us.
Yeah. I like
So, the building commissioner is on both the zoning task force and I believe he attends the planning board, but I will find out. But Tom certainly.
He's on the site plan review committee.
Okay, so he can at least tell us, what's going on there. And so, Matt, your suggestion was there's he can inform us about something that's going on, and we can have some insight into it that way.
Right.
This was viewed as, let's try an experiment and see if we get more small apartment development. Like, if it doesn't work or we have issues with it, we can always rethink it, but we're not getting very much small apartment development. We need to make it easier, and let's give it a try for a few years. There was no other place on the Cape that has tried this that they had as an example. So,
I think it's a good idea. There's a need, so why not make it possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Very good.
Good, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's,
you.
it's nice, it's fun for us to, it bothers me that there's not some real formal process, because here we are, as sort of the enforcers of the zoning code, they don't ask us anyway, be that as it may.
Yeah, I know.
So then it's gonna fall on you to make us an active part of this process.
I'm gonna work at it. I'm gonna talk to George before every meeting, and I'm gonna tell him we need the information further in advance so we can actually have a discussion.
I'm certain George would be happy for our input, frankly. I think he will be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think there's
oh no,
there's a
I'm not
couple
gonna
places.
tell you one thing. I'm not gonna tell you what one member of the planning board said. I told Jerry, it'll just annoy you, so I won't say it.
Every committee has one, except us.
I'll
So,
take it.
I should, because it's humorous. I will, Jerry, I'll tell him. So when George brought up the issue that Jerry raised from Locust Street development, that, we put a restriction on the amount of time you could, you had to rent for. This person said, what's the zoning board dealing with that? Why are they doing that? So George told them, well, they have the right to have any conditions on a special permit they see fit. So anyway.
And then Lynn went on to say, these old white men think they know everything.
They are all oldish white men, and they do kind of have that attitude. But I told Jerry, I know old white men who don't think they know everything. So,
Or at least hide it. We hide it well.
yeah, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Anything else? That was good. I think these discussions are good. I think they bring us together as a board too. I think it's a good process.
I will write George a follow-up note. Just yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna have Martin listen to this tape when he comes back. So.
Okay.
One question about this. There's a couple things I've gone through zoning. First time ever going through zoning was around when I joined this board. The one thing we just spoke about with Mr. Zender's case, where we had to go to town council on what I think is a poorly worded or poorly written footnote. There's a couple of places in there that I think could be a lot more clearly defined. Attorney Ford's comment about that restriction of no special permits above 15% applying to, in addition, if you have a greater than 4,000 square feet, wasn't obvious to me, and I don't think is, again, clearly worded. For small changes like that, is it worth for us to try and gather however many we can find, just submit those as a, just clarity update proposal for town
I
meeting?
think that's a great idea. It's a great
I
idea.
think it is too. Do people, if doing that sort of wording cleanup, does that require town approval or no?
But yeah, every change the color, it has to go through town meeting. But they have like a errata, they just there's 20 of them in a row, and it isn't a.
Yeah, okay, it's just little stuff.
Yeah, it isn't controversial, it doesn't. I think that's a great idea.
You don't think it's controversial. I don't know if you went to town meeting this week, but everything can be controversial.
Yeah. I couldn't go because of my cold. But,
You missed a riveting 3.5 hours.
yeah. anyway.
All right, I can, if you want, suggest to George, because there were several things that he was saying, it wasn't necessarily worded beautifully. I could suggest that wording they take a look at it and the wording be clarified, given the case. Because he's doing some clarification on other zoning
Really?
language.
Really? Well, we should be, I think it's just a question of, well, as we come upon the case and we have these kinds of questions, just make a note of them. We had that one, we've had two this year. We've had the town council. One was the issue of whether a new, lesser, a second incursion on the setback, but less than the original one, was an additional or just an intensification. That was a good exercise. We learned that. And then the one is Austin just referred to, the one about thou shalt not ever, whatever the language is, but it was very declarative, thou shalt not ever give over 4,000 square feet. And that is no way you can read that without, I mean, you can make the assumption that section 12, section 3, 164.3 does override that, which is the way the council interpreted it. But that's a leap. It's a leap of faith, you know. Good. This has been good. Anything else?
Thanks.
I call for a motion. I'll move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second?
Favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Good night.
Right.